بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Malcom X had many reasons as to why he became Malcom X. Obviously the great fadl and karam and rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His grace, His generosity, His blessings that He bestowed in the life of Malcom X allowed us to have him as the person that we see today. That is the case of anyone who is of benefit and who's successful. However, the question for us is, what were the dunyawi, what were the worldly reasons that he became so great? The ukhrawi reasons, the otherworldly reasons, or not ukhrawi, like the ghaibi nizam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah ta'ala's choice, etc. That's there. He chosen, wajtabakum, He chose Malcom X to be Malcom X. But what was the dunyawi sabab, the asbab? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's musabbibul asbab, He is the one who causes things to happen. There's the asbab. What are the asbab? The asbab is someone passes away and they died of cancer, they died of a heart attack, cardiac arrest, they died of a car accident, etc. Musabbibul asbab is the one who causes these reasons to come into play. So why did that person have a heart attack? Oh, poor nutrition, genetics, etc. Asbab, those are the reasons. Musabbibul asbab, Allah is behind the scenes orchestrating everything. Now this can be very confusing for people. Because for some people to begin to say, well, why is Allah unfair? Why is Allah doing this? Why did Allah make my uncle die, etc.? If He's really in charge, let him live forever. But the nizam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way He dictates the world to exist, was never meant to be permanent in this world. Sorry, the nizam is permanent, however Allah wants, but the world was never meant to exist permanently. Permanence is in the hereafter. So if permanence is in the hereafter, and the greatest reward is in the hereafter, and the greatest bounty is in the hereafter, then the shorter this life is, the better it is for the believer. And I think we forget that sometimes. You know, if a person had the choice, let's just look at Malcom X's life, that he has a comfortable jail cell for the rest of his life, or is able to go out into the real world, not even knowing the harms that can come, and sometimes the downs that can come, they will choose the real world because there's freedom associated with this. Jannah bil awla, more, is perfect, is all rest and relaxation, it's all enjoyment, there's no harm, there's no hesitation, there's no difficulty that comes in paradise. So the person who holds on to this world, the Rasulullah ﷺ has told us, ad-dunya sijnul mu'min, this is the prison of the believers. So a person who's holding on to this world so much and he can't let go of this world, that individual is missing out on what the hereafter has to offer. So when Allah Ta'ala says, Assalamu alaikum, you never joined us for ball. Yeah, 12 o'clock. Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah. In Ramadan we didn't because it's just that people are fasting, but as soon as Ramadan ended, we started playing, we did sports before, basketball and football so far. We haven't done soccer, ultimate frisbee or anything, but yeah. We meet at 12. Yeah, inshallah. We meet at 12. Next week, next week we don't have class because it's the long weekend, so people might be traveling. But then the week after, yeah, we usually play ball. We only played ball today because there weren't many people today. We normally play football and basketball. And I have to bring a frisbee, so we'll play frisbee maybe. That's the actual halaqah. This is just, cooling down before prayer. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, Allah's musabbibul asbab. He causes things to happen. So, yes, He caused Malcom X to be great, but what were the dunyawi things? What were the worldly asbab? What were the worldly reasons, means by which he became great? So first thing we see is that he was very, very taken to study. He was extremely taken to study. And when we look at the way he used to study, I told you that initially he began to just write. He just for a full year revised his grammar and worked on his writing because his penmanship was horrible. But you know what he used to do? He used to take a dictionary. He used to copy the word of the dictionary, starting with letter A, and copy the whole page down. And he tried to memorize it. Next day, the next page, next page, next page. He went through I believe, the entire dictionary in that way. That's why a lot of scholars of literature and history, they say that he actually memorized the entire dictionary. No, his eloquence didn't come out of nowhere. He had to work hard. A lot of us, sorry, my throat's been gone all day. A lot of us, we wonder, like, why am I not improving? Why am I not getting better? Even like people memorizing Quran, for example. Traditionally, when you memorize Quran, you would take the Quran page from your teacher, and you write out the entire page. Then you on a loaf, on like a tablet. And then you would go sit there and you memorize it on a wooden tablet, memorize it. You'd recite it, you'd pass, and then you would wipe that clean. And then you would write the next lesson on there. And that's how people memorized. Writing and memory are definitely linked together, but that's not our discussion or conversation today. But Malcom, he put a lot of effort. Imagine sitting there with broken penmanship, so poor that his sister could not read what he's writing, and limited vocabulary, and really distanced himself from books for the past 10 years. And now he's just focused to learn. And education is not a college degree. I don't want you to think that. As an educator, as an actual teacher who did his bachelor's and his master's. So I have a quote unquote advanced degree according to Western standards. And I will tell you, neither a bachelor nor a master's degree is going to be considered education. Yes, you can be educated while receiving that degree. You can also be educated in many, many other ways. You can be educated while walking. If someone works in a part of town that they don't normally live in, they're educated on a daily basis. They're educated in a different culture, a different lifestyle, what to do, what not to do. Someone travels for vacation, goes for a month, maybe backpacking across Europe. That person is educated. There's a lot of education taking place. Sheikh Hashim, who spoke at the retreat last week, when he was telling about his life, where he backpacked pretty much from from Paris to Spain to Northern Africa, through Africa, eventually into Ethiopia, there's a lot of education taking place. He wasn't sitting there with books, but he's being educated. So education is a different process than actual classroom knowledge that a person gains, or classroom information a person gains. You can be educated with a degree, without a degree. Of course, there's benefits to a degree. But I know sometimes people push education too much. They say, if my son doesn't become this or that, or my daughter doesn't become this or that, they're not successful. No, that's not the case. The Prophet ﷺ did not have formal education the way the Arabs had it. But he was educated at the highest degree. His literacy was not worldly literacy. It was a different type of literacy. And so Malcom, he had a lot of different types of education. His education on the streets were very, very important to him. His education in prison was very important to him. But eventually he reconnected to his academic education. So one of the ways by which you will improve is by education. I'm not saying school. School can be a means for education. But you have to educate yourself. For example, you're playing basketball. And you notice a guy favors his right hand. He's a righty, favors his right hand, doesn't go left. What do? Do you still face him straight when you guard him? Now, did you sit down in the book and study, if my opponent has a strong right hand and does not go towards the left, stand towards your left, meaning his right? No, you never read that anywhere. But the process of experiential knowledge has educated you to what? Even if he has the ball in his left hand, he's going to drive right. So always shade towards his right. That's education. A person is driving down Bloomingdale and they're going 55 and they get pulled over by a cop, and the cop pulls them over. That's education. You can't go 55. They drive by that same cop. They're going 48. What's the speed limit here? 40, right? 40? Yeah. That's 40. They got pulled over going 55. They didn't get pulled over going 48. In which situation are they speeding? On both. In which situation are they going to get busted? The first one, 55. So they know, okay, I have like a threshold of 7 or 8 miles per hour by which I can get away. That's a type of education. You wake up in the morning and you take your parents. I had two family members. If I can mention who they are. Two family members when we were younger. You guys know what stonewashed jeans are? So stonewashed jeans when we were younger, it was sort of popular in the 80s. You took jeans and stonewashed them. It looked like you rubbed stones against them, so the blue became faded to white. So it's sort of like this, like blue with a lot of fade into white. That's just stonewashed jeans, if I remember that correctly. So 2 members of my family, who I will not mention, because who knows, one day they can even come to MSI, etc. You might know them, you might not know them. My uncle got a new car. So they thought to themselves, stonewash jeans are popular, so I'm going to stonewash the car. So they took stones and began to wash the car. And guess what happened to the car? Completely scratched up. That was clear education that you cannot take things literally in life. Or you can't apply one principle, stonewashing jeans to car. There's a lot of education you can take there. I remember when I first learned the B word. I'm not going to say what the B word, it was a curse word. I was playing with my cousins, because we all used to live in the same block. Outside of our home, we were playing, older cousin, and someone came by, and there used to be a lot of gang activity over there. So one of the members of a specific gang, I remember, he came by, and he said something to us, called us Gandhi or something. Like, that was the big insult for deities back in the day. So anyway, my cousin responded, again, I'm not going to say who, by saying you, and he mentioned the B word. It's the first time I ever heard that. And I look up to my cousin, I'm like, man, that's so cool. I memorized the word. I only heard it once. I memorized it completely. And across the street from where I used to live, my uncle, the first floor, my aunt, second floor, my uncle, third floor. It's an apartment. And the basement was a basement that was just a musalla for the community. People would come pray. So that day was a summer, so it was really hot. So we didn't pray in the basement. We prayed in the second floor in my aunt's home, because there's, I think, AC or something. It was cooler there. So we're all praying there. And as we're all praying there, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum. Everyone's, subhanallah, subhanallah. So I sit down and go, B, 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 B. I'm just saying it. B, 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 B. I'm just saying it a lot. I don't know what it means. And then, B, B, B. Everyone's looking at me. I'm like, B, B. I ran out the door. I don't even grab my shoes. I ran down the stairs, ran across the street, jumped under my bed, and hid. Because I knew one day I was going to be in trouble. But I learned that way you can't say everything your cousin says in polite company. You learn things. That's education. That's education. So Malcom had types of education, but he recognized that his academic education had begun to falter. And he felt to become a complete human being, there had to be all components. And I'm telling you guys the same thing as a lesson. You have to be educated. You have to be spiritually educated. You have to be academically educated. You have to be street smart as well. Street smart, what does that mean? It doesn't mean you can walk down the street multiplying 17 by 19 and get the answer within a few seconds. Street smart knows that you know what to do on the street without getting beat up, without being called out, or without being a nuisance for others. So there's different types of education, but Malcom lacked here in the academic. So he pushed himself really hard, really hard, really hard. And he finally began to come to his own. And he finally began to grow, and then he began to read. So initially, for a full year, he began to just work on penmanship and basic reading. Then he began to write down the dictionary. And then he began to, as he advanced in words, and he recognized as I was writing down, the next day I remembered a lot of the page. And I would revise it, and I'd write more, and and he then began to grow his vocabulary, and then he began to read. And it was all under the tutelage of Bimbi. And that's the next lesson I want you guys to take to heart. That in this life, if you're going to become a physician, before you become a doctor, what do you have to go through? It's called med school. You leave med school, and then what do you do between med school and you're actually being an attending physician? Residency. Residency, you're pretty much an acting physician. You're working crazy hours, but there's someone watching over you, making sure you don't mess up. Mm-hmm. In the olden days, quote unquote, if you want to become like a welder or you want to become like a smith, what would you do? What would you do? Yeah, internship, right? You'd be, is that what you said? Apprenticeship, that's what it is, apprenticeship, yeah. You have an apprenticeship, get him a chair. You get an apprenticeship, and the purpose of the apprenticeship would be to learn under someone, and under their guise, make mistakes, be corrected, until you became a master, or at least proficient. As a teacher, what do? As teachers, we study, and before we graduate with our teaching degree, what do we have to do? You guys ever have a student teacher in your school? So student teachers are like these young teachers who come and they teach for like a quarter, and your teacher's just watching over them. You become a student teacher. You're a teacher, but you're still a student in your education, master's, bachelor's, whatever. And the teacher's watching you, and they're reviewing your work, etc. And the purpose of that is to be trained. So Malcom, he found a mentor. It was Bimbi, and he was training him how to think. And he was training him on how to become a better person. In that same way, we have to find mentors in life. I'm not saying you have to give bay'ah to anyone. I'm not saying you have to have a sheikh. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you have to find someone under whom you can develop. And this is all areas. No one goes straight to the Olympics. They have to have a coach. They have to have a trainer. No one, it's funny. I was talking to one of my friends. One of my friends, you guys hear about this? It's sort of funny. It's called Janwar Fitness. So Janwar Fitness, the guy who had it, Shaquille, really buff guy, that was my college roommate. We grew up together. He was my brother's classmate in school. He was my college roommate. So we actually used to work out together quite a bit in college. We actually used to bench almost the same amount. Then I don't know what happened after that. Like, he swallowed a cow and became huge, and I remained as I am. But so he and I were talking, and I was like, man, Shaq, I'm always sore. He's older than I am. I'm always sore. You guys saw it today on the basketball court. I was not moving. I'm just I'm sore. I've jacked up my knees really badly. It's like I can't move, and I'm always sore. So he's like, what's your workout schedule? I'm like, well, my workout schedule is I lift 5 to 7 days a week. He's like, okay, that's fine. And I told him what I do. And then he's like, okay. And then I'm like, for cardio, I do cardio on the bike or running 4 or 5 times a week, and boxing 2 days a week. He's like, okay. Then I'm like, I do jujitsu 3 times a week. He's like, stop. So you're doing too much. And he's like, how much food do you take? And I'm like, my caloric intake is about 1,500 calories. He's like, that's it? With your you should have at least 3,000 of 3,500 calories for the amount that you do. And then, so now I'm thinking, I'm doing more and I'm eating less. So I should be shredded and ripped. He's like, if you continue what you're doing, you're always gonna be tired. You're always gonna be sore, and you're always gonna be flabby, because your muscles will not develop and they'll be eaten away. And he began to explain everything to me. Now, common sense for me dictated, I'm working out more than I'm taking in, I should be losing all fat. But I don't know the field. He's an actual trainer, and he actually went to med school as well, although he works in IT. He went to med school and he's a trainer, etc. But he knows the sciences and the ins and outs. He knows nutrition. I don't know any of those things. So I told him on Friday, I'm like, we're supposed to meet today. He's like, yeah, when we meet, I'm going to give you a regimen. This is when you should work out, this is when you shouldn't, etc. And it's really hard. It's really hard. Not the workouts hard. It's hard to follow someone. Because now I have to go from working out 7 days a week, multiple things, to just doing it 4 days, 3 days. I'm going to feel like I'm going to gain weight. I'm going to feel like what I'm doing is wrong. But to submit unto someone who knows what they're doing is very, very difficult. But in the end, that's what makes a person successful. When I was younger, there was this famous thing called the Karate Kid. Not celebrating movies or anything. But the important lessons is there's this sage, this old karate master named Mr. Miyagi, and he taught his apprentice or his student Daniel-san something called. He would have him wax his car, or wax paint the fence or something. I don't remember exactly how it goes, but so the student gets upset. He's like, "Why are you making me do this? I'm coming to study and train in karate and making me do this." So he says, "Daniel-san, wax on." So wax on, you wax the car this way, wax off, wax the car this way. He's like, it says wax, do this, wax on. So he does this, and he strikes him, and it's a block. And he says wax off. He's doing the wax off moment, and he blocks. It's a different type of block. He's blocking this way. And he's showing him that I was teaching you without you knowing it. I was showing you without you knowing it. And the idea there is what? Sometimes a mentor, they have to be good people, will take you through steps and develop you without you even knowing it. When we used to wrestle, I used to wrestle in high school, man, our coach pushed us. There were days we just would throw up after practice. It was horrible. I remember I quit. I almost quit after the first year. I couldn't understand why. So I wrestled on my first meet, first tournament in particular. And you're so tired after a 6-minute match, you're exhausted. But the more you do these 2-hour practice on a daily basis, the more you can maximize those 6 minutes. They know what they're doing after all this experience. And so in that exact same way, if you want to improve in something, you have to find someone under whom you can improve. Don't just think I can watch a video on YouTube. It's a big mistake people think today. I'm going to get my deen from YouTube. I'm going to get my basketball from YouTube. I'm going to learn how to throw a football from YouTube. I'm going to learn how to do martial arts from YouTube. If it was that easy, everyone would just be on YouTube. It's not how it works. It's never been how it works. Tradition always went person to person to person. And that's something that Malcom learns here. He learns it from Bimbi. Bimbi is identifying for him what he should study, what he should read, that you're intelligent, these are your strong points, etc. And Malcom is developing it, developing it, developing it. And he has someone's watchful eye, even though it's for a short period of time in the long term, in the long run, but still it was developing him. Now let's move on. Okay. Now Malcom, he begins to speak to Reginald. And as he begins to speak to Reginald, remember I mentioned last week that his siblings have now become part of Nation of Islam. Now those of you who don't know about Nation of Islam, the Nation of Islam is not what we consider Orthodox Sunni Islam. Just because the word is borrowed does not mean that it's Sunni Islam. I'm not trying to speak ill of the organization. They had a lot of good things came from them, but it's not Islam in the end. Just like sometimes when you have like and I'm not trying to ostracize people and push them away, but people will say, well, are Qadianis Muslims, are Ahmadis Muslims, etc. No one's saying they don't follow organized religion. We're just saying they're not mainstream Muslim. And it's not a bad thing to say that, because everything has a definition. Look, I go to school. So if I were to tell you this, I would say I go to work, I watch over a group of children every day, make sure they don't get hurt, and take care of them until their parents pick them up. What would you say I do for a living? Sorry? Babysit. I'm a teacher. But isn't everything true what I do? And I'm a high school teacher for that matter. But, oh, they're not children. Well, aren't they someone's children? Aren't the rules the way I word something, in the end, can make you have different ideas. But in the end, my label is a teacher. The label of something and the definition of something have to connect. If I gave my job description, I wouldn't say you're daycare, or you run a daycare center, or you're in a daycare center, or you're a babysitter. You have to explain your position more. Yes, those are parts of your job, but your main job is that you prepare lessons, you instruct students in those lessons, you assess students in those lessons, you give them the tools to be successful in that subject. That's what makes you a teacher. All those are secondary. Yes, the Nation of Islam uses the word Islam, has the position of the Prophet Muhammad somewhere in there, believes in the prophets. Yes, it has the name Muslims for its followers. Yes, they have mosques, quote unquote, and mosque-like structures that exist. Yes, they have these things, but it's not Islam. And it's okay to say that. It's okay to say that. Because number one, they don't believe that the Quran is the only text. Quran is the only book to be followed according to the Muslims. They don't. They'll take from the Bible, they'll take from the Torah, and they'll take from Quran as well. And those are all texts that they'll take from. Number two, they don't believe the Prophet ﷺ was the final prophet. And we're going to get into that shortly. Number three, they believe that Allah was a human being, which we don't believe that. Number four, they have end of time, what's called eschatology. The eschatology of theirs is different. We don't believe at the end of time that a mothership will come onto earth and take all those who will be saved and fly them away and everyone else will be damned on this earth. No, we don't believe that. Number five, we don't believe that only blacks are people of greatness. We believe anyone can be people of greatness. So they have these sets of beliefs that are not part of Orthodox Islam. Thus, we don't think they're Muslim. They have a lot of good things. Their organization, their commitment, their structure, there's a lot of great things that they have. But they're not Muslim. So now I mention this because in this interaction with his brother, he finally said the following: Malcom, if a man knew everything that there is to know, who would he be? So Malcom said, well, he should have to be some kind of God. So Reginald said, there is a man who knows everything. So I, meaning Malcom, asked, who's that? He said, God is a man, Reginald said. His name is Allah. Now understand this. Now, when Filbert, his other half brother, was writing to him, he wrote about Allah and Elijah Muhammad, etc. So it began to click for him. So Malcom said he was confused, but he began to listen, he began to listen, he began to listen. And so Reginald began to say, the devil has only 33 degrees of knowledge, known as masonry. So they said that there's 360 degrees of knowledge. God has 360 degrees of knowledge, and it's all encompassing. And then the devil has only 33 degrees. And so the devil uses his masonry to rule other people. Don't want to go into that. Let's just move forward. Then he told me that God had come to America and that he had made himself known to a man named Elijah, a black man just like us. This God had let Elijah know, Reginald said, that the devil's time was up. And then Malcolm was like, I just listen. And then Reginald said, the devil is also a man. Malcolm asked, what do you mean? Them, he said, Reginald said. The white man is the devil. Now, it takes some back steps to understand everything that's happening, okay? So first of all, what does this mean the white man's the devil? According to the history of the Nation of Islam, they believe that the black man was the chosen man on this earth. Then there was a mad scientist known as Yaqub. And Yaqub took the lightest black people to a separate area, separate island, and began to mate them, and then their children from their children, the lightest, and mate them, until eventually he came up with the white man. The white man's the devil. This is according to Malcolm's words. Which is obviously, we don't believe that. We obviously don't believe that. Furthermore, they believe that a man named W.D. Fard, they pronounce it fraud, interestingly enough, but it's Fard. W.D. Fard came, and Master Fraud, as what they call him, came to this earth looking like a Pakistani individual, Pakistani carpet salesman, I believe. I forget the last part, but he's Pakistani. And he taught Elijah Muhammad that you are a prophet and this is the religion, and then he disappeared and he left. Now I'm simplifying, there's much more to it, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on the beliefs of the Nation of Islam. But this is what they believed. So before we say Malcolm was a Muslim for a long period of time, he was not. These are not Islamic beliefs. But this is what they believed. Now one of the purposes for which they believe in the black man being the first person, the black man being a prophet, and all these things is because black history for the black man in America was completely shattered. They didn't know, I told you this before, right? Why did they call themselves African Americans? Why not call yourself a Nigerian American, or a Somali American, or a Sudanese American, or Mauritanian American, or a Kenyan American? Why are they called African Americans, or why are they called African Americans? Yeah, they don't know their origins. Because they were stolen from their lands, their parents were brought here, often they were because remember, Africa is not a country, it's a continent. Just like India and Pakistan are countries. You're not going to say Asia is a country, and India is a city and Pakistan is a city. No, these are all countries. So Kenya, Madagascar, what used to be Zaire, the Congo, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mali, Malawi, all these places, these are all what? These are all countries. So when you have marriages between different countries, it's sort of like an interracial marriage because there's differences. Not all black people, if you go to Africa, I lived in Africa, they don't look the same, they don't have the same features, they don't have the same accents, they don't have the same language, just like not all Asians don't. So then those marriages has produced more children. The children did not know where they tie their lineage back because of slavery. They were all stolen from Africa, not all. Your early generation was stolen from Africa. And so subsequently, they took this label of African American so they could at least have some place to connect themselves back to. Then in America, what's their history? They're not taught of the glory. America is literally built on the back of black individuals working. And the minds and the skill set of Native Americans and their blood. And the minds of immigrants. That's what it's built on. I'm not taking anything, because everyone's an immigrant unless you're a Native American in this country. That's what it's built on. So black African Americans have a lot of pride, if they were given the opportunity to experience it, to know that this country is pretty much built from their efforts. But they weren't taught that. So now they're made to feel low. Prior to the mid-1900s, a black American was considered, was it 3/4 or 2/3 of a white American? Was it 2/3 or 3/4? I forget the exact amount now. But they weren't even considered a full person. In the eyes of Allah, they were not even a full human being. So now when someone begins to come and say, whoa, take a step back. Do you know that your ancestors were kings and they were prophets and God chose a prophet now and he came in the form of a human being and he chose a black man to do so? And we used to rule the world and the white man came from us and you're teaching, some of these things are factual and some of these things are not factual. It makes a black person become very proud of their heritage. So they begin to latch on. And that's what they began to do. En masse, they became influenced and happy by this. And they began to latch on and hook themselves on to Elijah Muhammad and his teachings. It wasn't growing that fast. It really began to grow quickly once Malcolm came onto the scene, but it began to grow. So Malcolm began to listen. I'm going to wrap this up so we can get going. So I'm just going to quote a couple passages. One, you don't even know who you are, Reginald had said. You don't even know the white devil has hidden it from you, that you are a race of people of ancient civilizations and riches and golds and kings. You don't even know your true family name. You wouldn't even recognize your true language if you heard it. You have been cut off by the devil, white man, from all true knowledge of your own kind. You have been a victim of the evil of the devil, white man, ever since he murdered and raped and stole you from your native land, the seeds of your forefathers. And these things, they resonated. So now Malcolm began to think, this is true knowledge. This is the truth. And he began to align himself with the truth. And what would happen is he began to correspond with Elijah Muhammad from prison. And he began to, I'm just, there's a lot of detail about, if you're reading the book, page 168 and 169 begins to give all the Mr. Yaqub, there's 59,999 all black followers. Every third or so child would have some trace of brown, and then he would do this for like 200 years or 150 years, and then 200 year span. Then they would it would be only brown people. And another 200 years until there were no browns, there were only reds. And another 200 years until the reds became yellow, and then 200 years until the yellow became white. And that's how there's all these proliferated different races in the country, the world. I just want to let you know what they're thinking. So now Malcolm, he's like, man, I want to know this. I want to know all of these things. He's learning, he's soaking it in, and he's reading. And now he begins to say, this is it. That this is exactly what I need. And now Malcolm is sold. So he wrote to Elijah Muhammad, and this is where we're going to end off chapter 11. My goal was to finish this by Eid. We're going to have to take a little longer than Eid. Because I need a little more time. I'm going to try to bring some two or three chapters together at a time, but and I like the book a lot, so I have to go through the details over here. Cool. Any questions before I let you guys go? I'm going to go grab my kids and bring them for Dhuhr, inshallah. Okay? Yes?
How did you get thrown to jail?
Oh yeah. Was that last week that we discussed that? Maybe. You weren't here. So what happened was, Malcolm, to those of you who had missed last week, I know there's a retreat. Malcolm was, he used to have this whole, like crime ring that he had established, and it was him, and it was Sammy, it was Shorty, and then Sammy, and then Sophie and her friend as well. And Sophie and her friend, they were both white. So they would go around different areas of Boston, and they would go home to home, and they'd pretend like they're college students or like these workers, and they would come and say, oh, we want to come take a survey. So they see white people, they let them in. At that time it was very trusting. Then they would pretend to have a clipboard, pretend to take notes of what they're saying, ask random questions. And the person would answer questions. What they would look around the apartment as they're taking maybe they'd be asked to come sit down, and they would, as they're walking, they would see what's valuable. And then they would pretend the person would ask questions. They would sometimes just take notes, but really about what's in the apartment or the home. And then they would come back. They would tell Malcolm and Shorty and Sammy, and they'd say, this is what's here, this is the address, here, this is where you find gold, this is what's valuable, this is what's good. And then they had highlighted everywhere in that paper. And then, so Malcolm would memorize it. He would pretty much draw out an entire, because he's very intelligent, a map of the home. He would memorize everything. And they would wait a few days, maybe wait a week, and then they would go to that home and they would break in and they would steal. And so they would kept doing this, and the FBI and the police were frustrated. We can't find this person. Who keeps doing this? Now finally, one day they put an alert to all pawn shops, etc., that keep an eye out for some suspicious behavior, namely this type of person. Long story short, Malcolm robs and takes this really nice watch, goes to a pawn shop, tells the pawn shop that it's my watch, it's broken, can you fix it? They're fixing it, but he also contacts the cops because this is the watch that fits the description of some of the items that have been stolen. The cops, they come in undercover. Malcolm goes there to pick up his watch. There is, he could feel something was off. There's a white man there, and Malcolm goes to the counter to get the watch. The person in the store comes to give him the watch. He makes a motion. That white man comes. He's actually a cop, and he has a gun. And Malcolm's always strapped. So Malcolm, as soon as that happens, another man walks in, a black man, and so they think that person's with Malcolm. When they think that person's with Malcolm, so there's three cops. Only one's in plain sight. Two are hidden in the back. So he turns himself and he points the gun to that person. Malcom thought for a moment, I can just turn around, take my gun out, shoot this cop and run away. But he said, for some reason, Allah protected me, I decided not to do that. So I put my hand on the shoulder of the cop turned to look at me, I lifted my coat, there was my holster with my gun, and I pointed to him and told him to take it. The cop's jaw dropped, because what he did was he made a mistake. He should have backed up and sort of had them both in his vision. And so he could have been killed that moment. Malcom could have killed him. And at that moment, 2 other cops stepped out. Malcom realized if he shot him, they would have shot and killed him right away. So the cop was very grateful. He didn't say it, but Malcom felt, because the interrogation, everything afterwards went a little smoothly, and he felt that the cop was grateful for him sparing his life. Shorty was caught, Malcom was caught, the 2 girls were caught, Sammy ran away, they never caught him. They went to the court for a first-time offense, first time being caught. It should have been 1 to 2 years in prison. They got 8 to 10 years, 3 counts in prison. And the judge kept saying you shouldn't have been with white women. They were so obsessed with the fact that Malcom and his friends were with white women. That's pretty much what they went to jail for. And that was the reality of early to mid-1900 America. That's what they hated. Okay, cool. Okay, it's adhan time. I'm going to go get my kids for prayer. SubhanAllah bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي